5:30 is the time here on ABC Radio Sydney. Coming up, Anne Hollins will be here for midweek conference. I wonder what your inflation indicator, though, is. Jeff is here from Oyster Bay. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how you going, Richard?
Yeah, the product that you've noticed that's just an indication of how much inflation's going on.
Yeah, so in our office, I buy my team every Friday a fruit flan, just as a small gesture of thanks for putting in so much hard work during the week. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that the cost of fruit flans have gone up from about $25 to $38.
$38.
Just in this week. I know.
Yeah,
crazy.
that's huge, isn't it? I mean, good on you for appreciating the staff and all that, but it makes it pretty difficult, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and I'm have to tighten my budget a bit too. So, we celebrate, instead of celebrating Fruit Flan Friday, we celebrated Frozen Friday. So I bought everyone a paddle pop instead.
Frozen Fridays at Jeff's workplace. Hey, good on you, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah,
See ya.
there you go. The price of fruit flans, the price of chips and 3 scallops. We've heard about the price of cat food and dog food, of laundry, liquid detergent, of Tim Tams, of avocados, of making a lasagna for Dad. Our caller said now $50 to make a simple lasagna to take round to her dad's place. It's 29 to 6. What's your inflation indicator? Let's take some news headlines. Adam Story, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard. There have been more than 800 calls for help across New South Wales due to the storms that hit last night and today. Sydney alone has received more than 350 calls for assistance, with parts of the northern beaches and Sydney's east particularly hit with torrential rain. A number of residents and businesses are still without power. Meanwhile, more than 9,000 households in New Zealand are still without power, more than a week on from Cyclone Gabrielle. Periods of heavy rain are expected in Hawke's Bay from Thursday through to Saturday, and some in rural areas are facing weeks before they have their power restored. The Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neil says Australia's migration system is broken and backwards and is in desperate need of a fundamental overhaul. She's lamented what she says as the staggering drift away from permanent migration towards a focus on temporary migration. And apprentices and trainees in regional areas will now be able to apply for a $250 travel card. The state government says the initiative will run as a 2-year trial. More ABC News at 6 o'clock.
Adam, thank you. Anne Hollins in a bit. Tom Saunders is also here. I'm listening from New Zealand, says one of our texters. Can you wish my friend Joe in Brookvale, who's also listening, a hello, enjoy your inflation wafer, is the message. So good luck to Joe in Brookvale from NZ. What a great Self-Improvement Wednesday, says Daz. Of all the segments you've come up with over the years, self-improvement is just the best. Thanks to the team. That was they're always pretty good, aren't they? But that was a great listen from Sebastian. Tom, the weather and lots of it, really. Last night was pretty intense, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was insane, those storms. I mean, the key feature, Richard, of the storms last night was the slow movement. Often when you get a thunderstorm, it lasts about 20 minutes and you might end up with 10 or 20 millimetres. But because they were moving slowly, we had hours of heavy rain. Terry Hills was the wettest suburb, 127 millimetres. Mm-hmm. That's a month's worth of rain, and most of it fell in just a few hours as their heaviest fall in 3 years. Another big one was Belrose, 116 millimetres. So it was the northern suburbs where we had the heaviest falls.
And I talked to the SES a bit earlier, and that's where their efforts were concentrated today. So many trees down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was mostly from the heavy rain as opposed to gusty winds that normally bring down trees. Now, the trough responsible for the storms moved up to the Hunter this morning. So parts of the Hunter have had over 100 millimetres today. And now the worst of it's moved up to the mid-north coast. There's still some light showers over Sydney. I can see them on the radar. But the easing trend will continue overnight tonight. And then tomorrow, back to normal weather, we'll say. Partly cloudy for Sydney. There's still a chance of a shower, about a 30 or 40% chance in most suburbs. And a temperature range 19 to 25 for the city. And 23 to 25 across the whole city, so not much variability for the maximum tomorrow.
This is always the point when talking to you, Tom, where I have to remember which day of the week it is. Give me a moment. So that was Thursday. What's Friday?
Yeah, I struggle as well. Sometimes actually live on air when I'm doing the 7-day forecast, I muck up the days. Friday is 2 days away. Yeah, partly cloudy, 26.
Thank you.
And there's still a slight chance of a shower. So the next couple of days, you've got me laughing. Slight chance for shower for the next couple of days. Saturday, mostly sunny, 27, and Sunday, partly cloudy, and a top of 29.
All right, and the weekend?
That was the weekend.
Oh, that was the weekend.
We've lost the days again.
I'm going to have a little spreadsheet when you
I'll hold it up in front of you. I'll point at the days.
Exactly. We'll see you on the news tonight. There's Tom Saunders. Let's check what's on tonight's edition of PM.
David Lipson here on PM at 6:30. 3 days into the new COVID booster regime, doctors are waiting for stock of the latest shots due in a few weeks, and patients are tossing up which one is best in their arm. Also, as the Indian diaspora grows, there are fears that caste discrimination is happening in Australia, and calls to follow the US city of Seattle, where it's been outlawed.
This is a huge historical, cultural baggage which is coming here. And if it gains ground in Australia, and if we are talking about racism and rights of people, we need to start thinking about caste as a big issue.
That's PM coming up at 6:30 tonight.
Yeah, hot roofs and inflation indicators. There's some of the things we're talking about this afternoon. Banana bread has gone from $18 to $33. Ouch, says Brett. Crystal kitty litter, now $23 a bag. Used to be $17. Doesn't sound too much, says our texter, but it all adds up, especially as I'm trying to be a responsible cat owner and not have the cat chase wildlife. And in terms of the coloured roofs, Richard, around Gladesville, there are new houses with the outside walls clad in black ColourBond cladding. That will have the aircon working overtime. It's total madness, says Mark. If you want to text 0467 922 702. He doesn't know what day of the week it is. Doesn't know his own phone number. It's going very well. If you want to call us, 1300 222 702. Now, were you badly parented? Maybe you grew up with family violence or the neglect of parents who just weren't that into the job of parenting you. Maybe you grew up in a family where the parents argued about parenting, one overly strict, the other lax, and them fighting about it in front of you. That's hardly ideal either. When you became a parent yourself, given that background, how easy was it to reset, to find your own model of parenting? Did you try to find good parents you could copy, not having had that example yourself to follow? Or did your parents actually give you an instant model? I'll just do everything, the opposite of what they did. That's the sort of parent I'm going to be. And sometimes even with the best of intentions, did you find yourself occasionally reverting to those bad models of your own childhood? Almost like the hand of your father or your mother had reached out from your childhood and grabbed you and kind of got you doing what they used to do. Being a good parent when your own parents weren't so great. That's our topic for Midweek Conference. And I hope you can share your own experiences of the childhood you had and then how you tried to transform it into a better childhood for your own children. 1300 222 702. If you've got a story to tell and some wisdom to impart, I'd love you to call us 1300 222 702. Anne Hollins is Australia's National Children's Commissioner, and she joins us here on Drive. And good afternoon.
Hello, Richard.
Now, in healthy families, I guess you learn to parent through the parenting you were given. You just copy it. But not everyone's that lucky, are they?
No, indeed. And, well, I guess every family is sort of, what was the saying, imperfect in a different way, you know. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of variability, of course, and it does sort of run across the generations because, you know, the thing is that what we experience as children is really powerful, and it's powerful in influencing our later lives, including how we are as parents, whether we like it or not. And it's really understandable that we would reach for what seems familiar when we become parents, especially when we're under pressure. And let's face it, we know there's a lot of pressure moments when you're dealing with kids, right? So, but it is also possible to change, to adapt what we saw our parents doing, but and what feels sort of familiar somehow to us, if we want to. If we don't think it's fit for purpose now, or with our own children, if we really want to do it a different way, it's just quite hard because it's habitual behaviour that we've had sort of wired. We've grown up with that wired into us, and we have to kind of step aside and deliberately change.
That's right. That's why I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, because on one hand I can see that it would be easy to follow the patterns of the past, even if intellectually you feel they're terrible patterns. But on the other hand, I can imagine some people being really inspired by the bad parenting they got to say, I'm not going to be that sort. I'm not whatever the qualities of it were, either violence or neglect or emotional distance or whatever it was that they felt was not ideal about their own parenting. I can imagine that being inspiring. I'm not going to do that with my own children.
Yeah, and I think it can inspire us to go looking for other role models, as you said in your intro, or to indeed get educated about, well, what is good parenting? And if there is a lot more science now to back us in on that, by the way, whereas it used to be seen as sort of something that you intuitively knew how to do it. Now we know that there are better ways and less good ways. Given that no one's perfect every day, of course, but if you do some things most of the time, then we know that things are going to work out a lot better.
Anne Hollins is with us, Australia's National Children's Commission. Did you just follow the parenting that you got? If you didn't like it at the time, do you try to do the opposite? How does this go? How difficult is it to change the patterns you grew up with? With the best intentions, do you sometimes find yourself slipping back into those habitual patterns because they're so familiar, even though you wanted to resist them? 1300 222 702 is the number. Eileen is here. Good afternoon.
Hello, how are you? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get you off speakerphone.
Back
There
onto
we
the...
are.
Yeah, that's better. So tell us your story, Eileen.
So my story is I grew up in a council house in Coventry, two wonderful parents, but they had very little. So I was always saying, could I have that doll? Could I have this? And it was always no. And I was always upset and sad. So I moved to Australia, become quite successful and have two children of my own and decide I will never, ever say no and spoiled them beyond spoiling. But now my son has a daughter and he's very strict on her and he will not spoil her and he will not give her things. So it's actually gone backwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Each generation does the opposite of the previous generation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good story
so-
because it's about the freedom from poverty, though, isn't it? It's very understandable if you grew up with that, you sort of you want to break free of it, don't you?
You absolutely do, and if you can afford to buy that doll or that bicycle, then you'll buy it for them.
But not your son, of course.
Well, no, not just that. And, I very rarely said no, which I don't think was a good thing, but I think they appreciate it, but I think they also realise that they were never told no.
Okay, so back to the sort of values of the grandparents in a way.
Yeah, so my little granddaughter is often saying, Daddy, can I have? And he says, no, you can't, because you can't have everything.
You can't have everything. And what does the grandmother do, though? You keep spoiling them, do you?
I'm spoiling her, absolutely. I'm spoiling her. It's in my nature now.
You go for it. Hey, that's our right, isn't it, as grandparents? Hey, Eileen,
absolutely.
Thanks so much. 1300 222 702. How do you do things when the parenting that you got, you want to change it in some ways? How difficult is that to achieve? Were you determined not to be the parents that you had yourself, to change things? 1300 222 702. On the text 0467 922 702. And I love that story about coming from poverty, going to spoiling, then back to being cautious about it.
Well, yes, and both Eileen and her son, who is now a parent, have shown that you can do it differently, that you can make deliberate decisions. And yes, circumstances like poverty obviously can kind of get in the way of us perhaps always being able to sort of make the best decisions, if you like. Eileen can see now that she perhaps should have said no sometimes, right? But that's been picked up by her son. So, it's a nice sort of journey in that family to see how the parenting styles have changed.
Yeah, and of course her parents, they might not have wanted to say no. They just didn't have any ability to say yes because they had no money.
No, that's right. And sometimes, of course, things like giving kids stuff can become associated with showing love. And so I think, as a parent, if you're thinking through some of these things about what kind of parent do I want to be, do I want to be different to what I had, then perhaps it's important to also have some time reflecting on your own self, how that style had affected you, and maybe what some of your triggers might be before you sort of launch into, changing everything, if you like. I mean, it's about a bit of self-awareness can help.
Anne Hollins is with us. Our topic, being a good parent when your own parents weren't so great. That's what we want to talk about, how you try to change those parenting styles that you grew up with. Maybe you grew up with family violence, determined not to do it. How difficult was it to black out those patterns, or did you find they kind of reached out and grabbed you even with the best intentions? Maybe you grew up with distance. That was, I think, a very common thing about parents who either weren't that into parenting or maybe even found it difficult to show love and affection. Have you been determined to do the opposite of that? How's that gone for you? Has it been easy because you had such a negative example to just do the opposite of? You can tell us 1300 222 702. On the text, this is from Michael in Hazelbrook. Michael, thank you so much. My father was brought up from the old school and never showed any love or tenderness, he says. When I became a father, I decided that I would show my children how much I love them, and very often I love kissing and cuddling my kids and telling them all the time how much I love them. When they get sick, it's so lovely to do. And now I can't understand how my father remains so cold and distant all those years. That's from Michael in Hazelbrook. And something similar from another, I tell my kids every day that I love them because my parents have never said it to me, and those words matter. In a way, what Michael says and brings up another part of this, which is sometimes when you become a parent, you become aware and even a little bit upset about the poor parenting you received. I mean, you might be more upset now than you were at the time because you realise how rich this relationship can be.
Yes, it can be quite confusing, as Michael says in his text, like how come his father didn't do that when it's such a precious relationship, and, it almost can't make sense of it now. But again, we're hearing in these texts some generational change, of course, and, what's acceptable and not acceptable in one generation compared to another. And even that thing of saying, I love you every day to your child. I mean, well, I don't know about you, Richard, but that didn't happen to me. Mm-hmm. So, I think that that was kind of not the done thing across many families. Well,
if you said that you love them all the time, they might get too big for their boots, Anne.
Get tickets on themselves.
They might get tickets on themselves, or too big for their boots, or there were a variety of expressions, weren't there?
That's exactly right. And so we have very much done a 180-degree shift on that, where we really do want our kids to know, generally these days, without any shadow of a doubt, how much we care about them. But often that's a cultural thing to do with different generations. Mm.
You see, I think this is one of the most inspiring things in life. If you can give your children better parenting than you received. And it's, I think it can be quite difficult because of the things we've talked about the modelling that the good modelling you can't draw on. But if you can do it, I think it's the most beautiful thing, to take darkness and then turn it into light is one of the great ambitions for life, really. I remember, I write about this in Flesh Wounds, but the best speech I've ever seen in my life, forget Barack Obama and Winston Churchill or anything like that. The best speech was at a 70th birthday party of a family friend of ours. And he had a really rough childhood. I think by the sound of things, he probably had pretty violent parents and all of that stuff. And he's got 4 daughters and a son. And one of the daughters made the best speech I've ever heard. And it was also the shortest speech I've ever heard. Because she said, they're all gathered around at the 70th birthday party. And she said, if you knew what my dad had been through and yet what he gave us. And then she burst into tears and was sobbing so much she couldn't continue. And that was the speach.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, well, absolutely.
And I thought at that point, this guy, Noel, had come from a very dark place and somehow found light and turned darkness into light. And what an ambition for anyone's life there on his 70th birthday party to have a daughter who said that.
Well, absolutely. And what a creative achievement, as you said, to be able to fashion a different sort of relationship with your own children than what you had. And of course, the opposite of that is, and I know people even within my own family who chose not to have children because of their negative experiences, because they believed they couldn't be good parents. right?
Yeah.
So like how sad and tragic is that? So to have that sort of that optimism and that resilience and that hope that you can do it differently and follow through on it is very inspiring. I agree.
And one of the things I'm hoping to get out of today is to say to people who have got that thought in their heads, absolutely you can be a great parent having not had good parents. I mean, I feel this really deeply in my heart that it's absolutely possible. And I hate it when people think, oh, it's going to be impossible because I never had a good model. I just don't think that's true, because I think, I think you can just use it as a negative model. You can just say, I'm going to be different. And that can be a really powerful thing.
It can. And hearing about others who've done that can really help get the confidence to try, okay? But not everyone naturally has that self-confidence, of course. The good thing these days is that there is a lot more help available than there used to be. Even the Raising Children's Network website, like we have stuff online that we can easily access, as well as counselling and other and parenting education programs and so on. None of that was really around back in the day. So now we can actually go looking for, well, what are some better ways that will suit me, that will fit with who I am, and how can I better understand how my experiences have affected me and rise above those.
Anne Hollands is here, Australia's National Children's Commissioner. If you want to join the discussion, 1300 222 702. On the text 0467 922 702. Our topic, being a good parent when your own parents weren't so great. Does that chime with you? If you've got a story to tell us, 1300 222 702. On the text, when I was little, I hated and was distressed by my parents shouting at each other, says our texter. I swore that if I ever married, I would never let my children see me arguing with their mother. I never have. When we had our moments, it was behind closed doors. So absolutely using that example and saying, I'm going to do the opposite. Vlasta says, I grew up with a violent parent and abuse. Domestic violence was a daily thing. My parents stayed together. I escaped to the other side of the planet from Europe to here. When I first became a mum, I was determined to do the exact opposite to what I've been through. It was so difficult at first, as I kept feeling sad and traumatised, remembering my childhood and being so distraught about my father being so violent towards us as kids. I feel I need to surround my kids with love because that's what they deserve. My brother chose to never have kids as he was scared to repeat the abuse. That's from Vlasta. So exactly the story you're saying, Anne, of someone denying themselves parenthood because of that fear. And yet Vlasta's example really of being able to find the love and give her children something very different.
Yes, although she said it was hard at first. So, recognising that breaking free of whatever those sort of chains that have sort of you were kind of constrained by because of your own experiences, they do affect us. They're incredibly powerful. So not to pretend otherwise, but to kind of take them on, front on, full frontal, absolutely go, yes, I had a really terrible childhood. That, these things happened to me, but I can do it differently, and I'm going to get help to achieve that.
Brendan is here. Hi, Brendan.
Oh, hey, Richard.
Yeah,
Look,
your experience. Yeah,
I just wanted to add a little bit to what you were saying there. I mean, on one hand, you guys are talking about just being a better parent than your parents were, which I think is absolutely what we should all be aiming to do. I think there's two things there. One is don't set the bar too high. Keep the good stuff that your parents did, because every parent does lots of good stuff, even the ones who do bad stuff, and then minimise the bad stuff. And then the extra layer is to then pass on to your children that their job in their families is to do better than you've done.
Yeah. So each generation does a little better, and
Correct.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
our kids are doing better than we did, aren't they, Anne, with raising the next generation?
100%, Richard, 100%. And Brendan's really right. I mean, there is no such thing as the perfect parent, by the way. We're all a sort of a work in progress. And I've got my list here. Can I go through some of the things that I reckon if we do these things most of the time, then we'll be all right. I think we need to try to be predictable with our kids, like not hit them for what they did, one day and then smile the next day, or actually prefer not to hit them at all. But, be predictable, but be kind. Be attuned to the needs of the child. So kind of put your own needs aside to try to sort of stand in their shoes and see the world through their eyes a little bit. Try to relax and have some fun with the kids. And recognise that we need to change our style as the child grows and develops. So it requires a lot of flexibility. I reckon if you do those things most of the time, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, Anne Hollins, thank you. Brendan, thank you very much. Just on the text, when I was little, my siblings and I are very proud that we did not continue the physical abuse that we were subjected to, says our texter Lee, into our own families. All of us have seen that capacity in ourselves due to mental load, frustration, but we've been able to recognise it and pull back before the evil overcomes. That's from Lee, and that's such an interesting text, isn't it? Just in a few lines, capturing that sense that you're determined intellectually not to repeat the things you were subjected to, but how the past has this sort of ability to sort of reach out like a hand from the grave and pull you back into those patterns.
Well, it's kind of wired into us. That's the thing. Those early years when our brain is developing very fast, our experiences are lifelong, and they can be really positive experiences that set us up very well, but sometimes, sadly, they can be negative ones that we spend really our whole lives trying to overcome. But there are fantastic stories of people who do exactly that, given the right circumstances and the support around them.
Yeah, Lee says it's difficult, but managed it. From Eric, my brother and I didn't have children. Our father belted mum and me. We could not bring kids into the world with this background. That's from Eric. So it is quite common, as you're saying, Anne, for people just to say, I can't risk it. Richard is here on the line. Hi, Richard.
Hey, how you doing? I'm loving this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Add to it.
I'm a parent of 3 children and recently become a grandparent. And just experiencing from myself, I've had to almost implement 3 different parenting styles as my children were growing up according to their personalities. I'm an immigrant, and I often feel that because there are so many immigrant experiences in Australia, you bring a lot of negative or positive traumas in your DNA, and kids don't have that same experience as you may be experienced in another country or the stories or circumstances you grew up in. So I think it's a lot of personal growth to kind of get it right.
Yes, in other words, acknowledge this is not to justify violence or anything like that to children, but do understand that you and this is a journey for all of us, that the strange ways in which your parents treated you often had their own causes.
Absolutely. And I often told my kids when I got it wrong, parenting them, like, this is the first time I've got a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. I'm learning as well as you're growing. The main point I want to make, I think the healthiest environment is to have lots of extended family and lots of parenting role models around parents that kids can draw on, because we so often get it wrong.
Yeah, the emergency mum and the emergency dad, and make sure you get a groovy aunt. They're they're always very useful. 2 minutes to 6. Australia's National Children's Commissioner Anne Hollins is here, but we appreciate so much your stories and the honesty of them. Elle says, my husband's father beat him for every small infraction. We decided we would not hit our kids and find other ways to guide or discipline. That decision meant it was never a struggle or a temptation to avoid hitting them, and they've turned out okay too. That's from Elle on the text. This is about the decision not to have children because you've had a bad childhood. Is there any greater proof that you're a caring parent than deciding not to have children because you are concerned for the possibility of their welfare? And I take that point too, although I do insist from the depth of my heart that it is possible to have a rotten childhood and still be a great parent. And I think Anne agrees with that.
Yes, and just a few of the things the callers and texters have said. I think sharing the load is a really important thing. So if you can get people around you, even if they are a proxy family but not your real family, then I think that really helps. But just one final thought.
Really quickly, yeah.
Yeah, this is a relationship. You know, you're not doing stuff to the child. You're in a relationship with the child. Try and enjoy that and develop that as a really rich relationship.
The greatest fun you can have. Hey, Anne, thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard.
Anne Hollands, Australia's National Children's Commissioner, and to everyone who rang in and wrote with their stories, we're very grateful. It's 6 o'clock.
Good evening.